My name is Emily Dawson. I'm 26 years old. At 6:23 on a Friday evening, I came home from college with 2 suitcases, a graduation gown still folded in the backseat of my car, and the naive belief that my bedroom would still be mine. It was not. A 17-year-old exchange student from Denmark was sitting on my bed, wearing my old Northwestern sweatshirt, eating pretzels from a bowl, one recognized from my own desk, and video calling someone in Danish under the string lights I had hung when I was 16. For a second, I thought I had walked into the wrong room. That is how completely my life had been rearranged. The walls were still pale blue, but my photos were gone. My bookshelf had been cleared. My desk had been pushed against the opposite wall and covered with neat stacks of someone else's school papers. My quilt was gone from the bed. My lamp had been replaced by a sleek white one I did not recognize. The corkboard where I had pinned ticket stubs, college acceptance letters, and a postcard from my grandmother was empty, except for a printed class schedule and a calendar with soccer practices marked in green ink. The girl looked up, startled. "Hi," she said carefully. I stood in the doorway with my hand still on the knob. "Hi." She sat up. "Are you Emily?" The fact that she knew my name made my stomach drop. "Yes." Her expression changed into something apologetic and confused. "I'm Frasier. Your mother said you were not coming until tomorrow." "My mother, of course." Behind me, my suitcase tipped sideways in the hallway and hit the wall with a dull thud. Downstairs, I heard my father laugh at something on television. Normal sounds. A normal house. My childhood home. And I was standing at the door of the room where I had cried over algebra, hidden birthday gifts, practiced job interviews in the mirror, stayed up all night writing papers, and packed for college, while my mother told me, "This will always be your home." Apparently, always had a rent price. I stepped back. "Where are my things?" Freja's face went pale. "I don't know. Your mother said this room was available." Available, like a conference room, like a parking spot, like no one had grown up there. I turned and walked down the hallway toward my parents' bedroom, then changed direction because I already knew where they would be. Living room. Dad in the recliner, Mom on the couch with her tablet. Exactly as I had pictured them when I drove 3.5 hours home from Evanston after finishing my final week of graduate school. Only in my picture, Mom stood up, hugged me, cried a little over the gown, and said, "Your room is ready." Instead, she looked up and smiled too brightly. "Emily, you're early." I stood at the bottom of the stairs. "Who is in my bedroom?" Dad muted the television. Mom's smile faltered. "Oh, you met Frija." "Who is in my bedroom?" I repeated. Mom set down the tablet. "She's an exchange student. Her host family situation fell through last month, and we had space." Dad added, "Good kid, very polite." I stared at him. "You rented out my room." Mom stood. "Rented is such a harsh word." "Did she pay you?" Dad shifted in the recliner. "She contributes to household costs through the program." I looked at my mother. "So yes." Mom sighed. "Emily, don't start. Don't start." The family phrase for "please do not identify what we did before we finish justifying it." I said, "Where are my belongings?" Mom smoothed the front of her sweater. "We boxed everything carefully." "Where?" "The garage." The garage. In May. In Ohio, where humidity could curl photographs, mice could chew cardboard, and my winter clothes would smell like motor oil and lawn fertilizer. I walked past them without another word. Mom followed. "Emily, wait." I opened the door to the garage. Heat rolled out. Near the back wall, beside the snowblower and stacked patio chairs, were 12 cardboard boxes labeled in black marker. Emily clothes. Emily books. Emily Missio, Emily School, Emily Fragile. The last one had a dent in the corner. I stepped toward it slowly. The garage smelled like gasoline, dust, and betrayal. I opened the box marked Emily Fragile. Inside were picture frames wrapped in old grocery bags, my ceramic jewelry dish, a mug from my first internship, a framed photo of me and my grandmother at my high school graduation, and the small glass bluebird she gave me before she died. The bluebird's wing was broken, one clean crack, a small blue shard at the bottom of the box. I picked it up and held it in my palm. Something inside me went very quiet. Not numb. Quiet, there is a difference. My mother stopped behind me. "Oh," she said, I didn't see that. I turned around. You packed my life into the garage and rented out my room without telling me. Her face tightened. We didn't rent out your life. No, you just moved it next to the lawnmower. Dad appeared in the doorway. Emily, you're being dramatic. I held up the broken bluebird. Grandma gave me this. His expression softened for half a second, then hardened because softness would require accountability. It's just a figurine. That was when I knew this would not be a conversation, it would be evidence. Mom crossed her arms. You've been away for years. We didn't think you still needed a room sitting empty. I came home every break. You stayed here a few weeks a year because I was in school. You're 26, Dad said. You can't expect us to preserve a shrine. I laughed once. A small, ugly sound. A shrine? I expected a bedroom. Mom said, Freja needed stability. So did I. Dad stood straighter. You're not a child anymore. No, I'm not, which is why I know you should have asked before moving my property. Mom said, this is our house. I looked at her. Is it? That stopped them, just for a moment. Because they had forgotten something. Or maybe they assumed I had. When I was 18, before I left for college, my parents made me sign a lease agreement. Not because they needed rent right away. Because Dad said it would teach me responsibility. Because Mom said it would make financial aid paperwork cleaner. Because they wanted me to pay a fixed monthly amount from my campus job, and later from my internship income, to help maintain my space while I was away. $150 a month for the first year. Then $200. Then $250 during graduate school. Every month. For 8 years. They called it room maintenance. They called it adult responsibility. They called it proof that I still had a place at home without being entitled. I signed because I was 18 and scared to argue the week before leaving for college. I paid because I believed the words in the agreement. Bedroom on second floor, east side of residence, reserved for tenants' personal use during school breaks, holidays, summer periods, and post-graduation transition until written termination by either party with 60 days notice. Written termination, 60 days notice. They had written those words, they had made me sign them, they had accepted every payment, and then they rented my room to someone else while my lease was still active. I stood in the garage holding the broken bluebird and watched realization flicker across my father's face. Not full understanding. Recognition. He remembered the lease. Mom did too. She looked away first. I said, I'll be back in 10 minutes. Dad frowned. Where are you going? To my car. I walked out before either of them answered. My lease was in the black document folder I kept in my trunk, along with my passport, social security card copy, loan paperwork, apartment sublease, graduation forms, and every receipt my grandmother had taught me to save, because she said, people remember kindness loosely and money creatively. I brought the folder into the house. Freja had come downstairs by then, standing awkwardly near the kitchen with her phone in her hand. Poor girl. She looked terrified. This was not her fault. I placed the folder on the dining table. Mom said, Emily, don't make a scene. I opened it. Dad's jaw tightened. I pulled out the lease agreement. 4 pages. Signed by Robert Dawson. Signed by Linda Dawson. Signed by Emily Dawson. Dated August 10th. 8 years earlier. I slid it across the table. No scene, I said calmly, just paperwork. This is that story. Before I tell you how my parents learned that renting out their daughter's bedroom for cash becomes complicated when they made her sign a lease agreement years earlier, tell me where you are watching or listening from, and what time it is there. I always wonder who hears stories like this, while remembering the moment someone called you entitled for expecting the exact thing they charged you for. And if you connect with stories about women who were dismissed, displaced, underestimated, and quietly took their power back, like and subscribe to Ultimate Revenge. Some women do not scream in the hallway. Some women come home with the lease. I grew up in Westerville, Ohio, in a split-level house with beige siding, red shutters, and a maple tree in the front yard that turned bright orange every October. My parents, Robert and Linda Dawson, were practical people. That was how they described themselves. Practical when they bought used cars. Practical when they refused cable. Practical when they gave me one winter coat and told me to layer. Practical when they said emotions were useful only after the bills were paid. My father worked as an operations manager for a packaging company. He believed in spreadsheets, early mornings, discount tires, and making sure everyone knew he had never been handed anything. My mother worked part-time at a medical billing office and full-time as the household narrator, explaining what Dad meant whenever he said something sharp enough to cut. He's just worried. He's trying to teach you. He doesn't say it perfectly, but he loves you. Those sentences followed me around my childhood like wallpaper. I was their only child, which should have made me central but often made me more convenient to manage. There were no siblings to compare costs with, no one else to verify patterns, no one to say, "That's not how they said it happened." My bedroom was the one place that felt mine. Second floor, east side of the house, with a window overlooking the maple tree, pale blue walls, white desk, built-in bookshelf Dad had installed when I was 9, back when he still liked projects that made him feel generous. I used to sit on the floor and organize books by color, then genre, then height, because control over small things helped when adults used practical as a doorstop against feeling. The symbolic object in this story was the glass bluebird. My grandmother, Evelyn, gave it to me the summer before senior year. It was tiny, hand-blown, cobalt blue with a curved tail and delicate wings that caught sunlight on my windowsill. Grandma said, "Bluebirds mean happiness, but I like them because they leave when winter tells them to and come back when they choose." I said, "That's not very sentimental." She smiled. "Freedom is sentimental if you were raised by people who confuse love with management." Grandma understood my parents better than anyone. She was my mother's mother, and she loved Mom fiercely, but she also saw her clearly. She knew Dad's practicality could become control. She knew Mom often chose comfort over defense. She knew I was growing up into a girl who kept a bag packed emotionally, even when she had nowhere else to go. When my Northwestern acceptance letter arrived, I screamed so loudly the neighbor's dog started barking. Northwestern, scholarship, financial aid, work study, a chance. I ran into the kitchen with the letter in my hand. Mom cried. Dad read the financial aid breakdown twice, then said, "Chicago is expensive." "It's Evanston." "Same thing. I got aid." "Not full." "I can work." "You will have to." "I know." He set the letter down. "You sure you don't want Ohio State? Closer, cheaper." I looked at the purple logo at the top of the page. "No." Mom whispered, "Robert." He sighed. "I'm just being practical." Of course. Leaving was the first major decision I made that did not bend around their comfort. They did not punish me openly. They congratulated me, told relatives, posted a photo of me holding the acceptance letter. But under the pride, a transaction began forming. At first, Dad called it planning. "You'll need to understand costs." Then responsibility. "You're old enough to contribute." Then fairness. "We shouldn't keep a room empty for free while you go live somewhere else." I was 18. I did not know how strange that sentence was. I thought maybe all adult children paid to preserve their childhood bedrooms if they went away to school. A week before move-in, Dad called me into the dining room. On the table was a printed document titled Residential Room Agreement. I laughed because I thought it was a joke. Dad did not laugh. "What is this?" "A simple lease." "For my bedroom?" "For the room you expect us to maintain while you're away." Mom sat beside him, hands folded. "It's not meant to be harsh, honey. Your father just thinks it will help everyone be clear." Clear. Another family word that usually meant Dad had already decided. I read the first page. Tenant, Emily Dawson. Landlords, Robert Dawson and Linda Dawson. Room, second floor east bedroom. Rent, $150 monthly. Term, August 15th through May 15th. Automatically renewable yearly unless terminated in writing by either party with 60 days. Notice. Use. Tenant retains personal use of room during school breaks, holidays, summer periods, and reasonable post-graduation transition. Storage. Tenant may store personal belongings in room during active lease term. Access. Landlords may enter for maintenance with notice. I looked up. This is weird. Dad's face hardened. "It's adult." "I'm your daughter." and adults pay for what they use. Mom touched my hand. It's mostly symbolic. If it's symbolic, why is there rent? Dad said. Because symbolism without cost doesn't teach much. Grandma, when I told her later, said, that man could turn a hug into an invoice. But she also told me something important. If you sign it, keep a copy. I don't want to sign it. I know. Should I refuse? She was quiet, then said, can you afford to fight them the week before leaving? No, I could not. Then sign if you must, she said, but never sign without reading, and never pay without proof. So I signed. Dad signed, Mom signed. I scanned it at the public library that afternoon and emailed it to myself. Then I placed the original copy in a black document folder. Grandma bought me that folder. Boring armor, she called it. For 8 years I paid. From work-study checks, from tutoring, from summer jobs, from internships, from my assistantship in graduate school. Every month, transfer to Dad's account with the note, room rent. Sometimes I was late. Dad charged a $10 late fee twice. Yes, my father charged his college student daughter a late fee for her childhood bedroom. When I complained, Mom said, it's good practice for real life. I said, real landlords fix the sink when asked. She did not appreciate that, but the room remained mine. At least, I thought it did. Every Thanksgiving, I came home and slept there. Every winter break, I unpacked into the same dresser. Every summer, I lived there between internships and campus housing. I painted one wall a slightly deeper blue after sophomore year. I replaced the curtains. I bought a better mattress with my own money. I left books on the shelf, clothes in the closet, winter boots under the bed, journals in the desk drawer, Grandma's bluebird on the windowsill. Mom sometimes suggested I should declutter. Dad sometimes joked, at least the room pays for itself. That joke never felt funny, but I paid, and because I paid, I believed I had security. That is the strange thing about being raised by transactional parents. You begin to think receipts can substitute for tenderness. Sometimes they can, not emotionally, but legally. When Grandma died during my second year of graduate school, I came home for the funeral and slept in my room with the bluebird on the windowsill catching gray winter light. Mom cried in the kitchen, quietly, while arranging funeral flowers. Dad handled logistics. I sat on my bed holding Grandma's cardigan and feeling like the only adult who had seen me without needing me to justify the space I occupied was gone. After the funeral, Mom came into my room and sat beside me. She loved you so much, she said. I know. She worried about you. I know. She thought your father was too hard sometimes. I almost laughed. Sometimes? Mom looked away. He loves you. I know. That was true. But love and fairness do not always arrive together. The lease continued. I finished my master's degree in education policy at 26. My plan was to come home for 3 months while starting a job search, then move into my own apartment once I accepted a position. I told my parents this in February. Dad said, 3 months? Yes. That's a long transition. My lease says post-graduation transition. He frowned. You still have that thing? The lease? Yes. Mom laughed lightly. Emily keeps everything. I smiled. Yes. Dad looked annoyed. I should have noticed. In March, Mom began asking when exactly I would arrive. In April, Dad asked whether I had too much stuff in the room. In early May, Mom said, if you don't need all those college books, we could box some. I said, please don't touch anything until I get there. She said, of course. Of course is a dangerous phrase from someone who thinks permission is inconvenient. I paid May rent. $250. Memo. Room rent May. Dad accepted it. 4 days later, they boxed my belongings and rented the room to Freja through a private exchange placement arrangement connected to a local school. They would receive $900 a month for room and board. $900. My room had finally become profitable enough to erase me. When I placed the lease on the dining table, Dad tried the first tactic. Dismissal. Emily, this was never meant to be some legal weapon. You wrote it. It was to teach responsibility. And I was responsible. I paid. Mom said, we didn't think you still considered it active. I paid May rent. Dad said, That was before circumstances changed. Did you give written notice? He looked away. I turned the page and read aloud. Automatically renewable yearly, unless terminated in writing by either party with 60 days notice. Mom's face flushed. We are your parents. You are also my landlords, apparently. Dad slammed his hand on the table. Don't get smart. Freja flinched in the kitchen doorway. I looked at him. I'm not being smart. I'm being accurate. His jaw worked. We own the house. And you leased part of it to me. For a token amount. You accepted it. Mom said we needed extra money. That was new. And almost honest. I turned to her. For what? She looked at Dad. Dad said, that's none of your concern. Then my room was none of Freja's. Freja spoke softly from the doorway. I am sorry. I didn't know. I turned immediately. This is not your fault. Her eyes were wide. My program coordinator told me this was okay. I believe you. Mom looked relieved, as if my kindness to Freja might soften toward her. It did not. I said, Freja, can you give us a few minutes? She nodded and went upstairs. Poor girl. A casualty of adult greed and bad paperwork. Dad lowered his voice. You are embarrassing us in front of a guest. You moved a guest into my leased room. Mom said, where exactly did you expect her to go? Her previous host family backed out. I expected you to ask me before renting my bedroom. Dad said, you have no real damages. I laughed. A little. My property is boxed in the garage. One item is already broken. I have nowhere to sleep. And you collected rent from me and housing money from someone else for the same room. His face changed. Because I had said the quiet part in language he understood. Money. Double payment. Mom whispered, we can give you back May. No. Dad blinked. No? No. This is not only May. What do you want? There it was. The question he should have asked before touching my things. I said, I want my room restored, or equivalent housing paid for through the 60-day notice period. I want my belongings moved out of the garage tonight and inspected. I want anything damaged, replaced, or compensated. I want a written termination notice. I want my May payment returned. And I want Freja's coordinator notified that there is a housing dispute you failed to disclose. Mom gasped. You want to get us in trouble? I want you to stop getting paid for things you have no right to promise. Dad stood. You are not calling anyone. I stood too, not dramatically, just enough to meet his eyes. I already emailed myself photos of the boxes and the broken bluebird. The lease is scanned. The payment history is in my bank records. If you want this to become a bigger legal problem, keep telling me what I'm not allowed to do. For the first time in my life, my father looked at me not as a child to manage, but as an adult who had become inconveniently prepared. Mom began to cry. That used to work on me. It did not work that night. I need to pause here for a second. If you have ever been charged for responsibility, then called entitled when you expected the other side to honor their own terms, you know what Emily felt at that table. It was not just about a bedroom. It was about being told you were adult enough to pay rent, but still child enough to be ignored. If this story is hitting close to home, leave a comment and tell me what paperwork, receipt, or message finally proved you were not imagining the unfairness. And if you have not already, subscribe to Ultimate Revenge. The quiet part is over. I called my friend Alyssa from the driveway. Alyssa had just finished law school and was studying for the bar, which meant she was both exhausted and thrilled whenever real life offered a legal issue she could morally judge. She answered with, if this is about graduation photos, I vote no cap toss. My parents rented out my room. Silence. Then, your leased room? Yes. Oh, I am awake now. I gave her the short version. Lease. Payments. Exchange student. Belongings in garage. Broken heirloom. No notice. Double payment. Alyssa said, I am not your lawyer, and I am not admitted yet, but as your friend with 3 years of legal education and a deeply petty heart, do not sleep there tonight unless you feel safe. Document everything. Communicate in writing. Ask for copies of any agreement they made with the exchange program. Do not threaten beyond what you are willing to do. I'm tired. I know. I just wanted to come home. Her voice softened. I know. That sentence nearly broke me. Not because it solved anything, because it named the wound under the lease. I just wanted to come home. Alyssa said I could stay with her for the night. She lived 20 minutes away in an apartment full of casebooks, coffee mugs, and bar prep outlines. I accepted. When I went back inside, Dad was in his office with the door closed. Mom was in the kitchen, crying quietly. I said, I'm staying with Alyssa tonight. Her head lifted. You're leaving? My room is occupied. She flinched. We can make up the couch. I looked at her. I paid for a room. She wiped her face. Emily, we didn't think you'd react this way. How did you think I'd react? She had no answer. I continued. I need you to move every box from the garage into the dining room tonight. Do not open anything. Do not throw anything away. Do not touch the lease copy on the table. I will be back tomorrow at 10. Mom whispered, Your father won't like being ordered around. I don't like being displaced. I went upstairs and knocked on my own bedroom door. Frasier opened it. She looked miserable. I'm sorry, she said again. You didn't do this. I can sleep somewhere else tonight. No, stay where you are. This is not on you. She swallowed. I heard about the lease. I figured. My coordinator should know? Yes, but I'll handle it carefully. She nodded. I don't want to hurt your family. I almost laughed. My family is doing that fine on its own. She smiled faintly, then looked guilty for smiling. I said, Good night, Frasier. Good night, Emily. I slept badly at Alyssa's. Not because her couch was uncomfortable, though it was. Because grief over a room sounds childish until you understand that the room was never only four walls. It was proof that there was still somewhere I belonged without applying. And my parents had rented that proof to someone else. At 10 the next morning, I returned with Alyssa, not as my lawyer, as my witness. She wore black jeans, a blazer, and the facial expression of someone prepared to take notes in a hostile deposition. Dad hated her immediately. Good. The boxes had been moved into the dining room. Not because Dad agreed with me, because he understood paper trails. I photographed every box, opened each one slowly. Clothes smelled like garage, books slightly warped, one framed photo cracked, the bluebird broken. My journals intact, thank God. My college diploma folder bent but not ruined. A box of winter shoes with dust and a dead spider inside. Mom hovered. Dad watched from the living room doorway. Alyssa took notes. Item. Condition. Photo number. Estimated value. Dad finally snapped. This is ridiculous. Alyssa looked up. Documenting property condition after unauthorized relocation is standard. Dad blinked. She's not an attorney. Alyssa smiled. Not yet. I almost laughed. We found 3 missing items. My grandmother's cardigan, a small jewelry box, my external hard drive. Mom said they were probably somewhere. I said, find them by tonight. She looked wounded. I did not apologize. Then I asked for the exchange placement documents. Dad refused. That agreement is between us and the program. And it involves a room leased to me. We are not showing you private documents. Alyssa said mildly, then Emily can contact the program directly and explain why she needs them. Dad glared. You are enjoying this. Alyssa looked at him. No, I'm extremely concerned by it. That shut him up. I emailed the exchange coordinator that afternoon. Her name was Karen Liu. I kept the message factual. Dear Ms. Liu, my name is Emily Dawson. I am Robert and Linda Dawson's daughter. I returned home yesterday and discovered that the bedroom currently occupied by Frasier had been rented through your program. I want to be clear that Frasier has done nothing wrong and should not be blamed or destabilized abruptly. However, I have an active written lease for that bedroom, have paid monthly rent through May, and did not receive notice or consent to vacate. My belongings were removed to the garage without my approval. I am attaching the lease, proof of recent payment, and photos. I would like to discuss a solution that protects Frasier while addressing the unauthorized room rental. Sincerely, Emily Dawson. Karen called within 30 minutes. She sounded horrified. Professional, but horrified. Emily, I am so sorry. Your parents represented that the room was vacant and available for the full semester. I understand. We require host families to confirm no competing occupancy claims. They did not have one. Clearly, I don't want Frisia punished. Nor do we. Our priority is student stability and safety, but we also cannot ignore misrepresentation. Good word. Misrepresentation. Karen arranged to visit Monday morning. My parents panicked. Dad called me Saturday evening. You contacted the program? Yes. You had no right. I had a lease. He was silent for one beat, then said, You are damaging our reputation. You did that when you rented a room you had already leased. Mom got on the phone. Emily, please. Frisia could be moved. I specifically asked them to protect Frisia, but they'll think we lied. You did. She cried. You make everything so black and white. No, the lease did that. I stayed at Alyssa's for the weekend. Sunday evening, Frisia texted me. I got your number from the family contact sheet. I hope that is okay. Your parents are arguing. I feel bad. I can ask my coordinator to move me. I replied, You did nothing wrong. Please don't carry adult problems. Karen and I are working on a stable solution. She wrote, Your room is very nice. I understand why you miss it. That made me cry. Not because she was guilty. Because she was kind in a house where kindness had become less common than rent. Monday morning, Karen Lou arrived at my parents' house with a folder and a calm face that made Dad nervous. I was there. Alyssa was there as witness. Frisia was at school. Karen sat at the dining table and reviewed the facts. Robert, Linda, when you applied as a host placement, you certified that the room was available and not subject to any rental, occupancy, storage, or family dispute. Is that correct? Dad said our daughter was away at school. Karen looked at the lease. She was also paying rent. Mom said it was symbolic. Karen looked at the bank records. Monthly transfers over 8 years do not appear symbolic. I liked Karen. Dad said, This is a family matter. Karen said, It became a program matter when you accepted housing funds for the same room. Beautiful, she continued. Frisia's placement must be stable. We will not remove her today, unless there is a safety concern. However, your host payment is suspended pending review. We will arrange either alternative housing for Frisia within 14 days or a written agreement among all parties. Emily's claim to the room must be resolved separately. Mom whispered, Suspended? Yes, Karen said. We cannot continue payment while there is a competing lease. Dad's face reddened. That was the moment the room truly changed. Not when my bluebird broke, not when I showed the lease, when the rent stopped. Money had started the betrayal. Money had to speak before they listened. Karen also asked to inspect Frasia's living conditions, confirm she had privacy, and speak to her separately after school. Dad looked humiliated. Good. The public payoff came sooner than expected. My parents had told several relatives that I was making trouble because I did not want to share space with an exchange student. They had left out the lease, the rent, the boxed belongings, the refund-like double payment situation. They had especially left out Grandma's broken bluebird because that would have made my mother's side of the family less forgiving. That Sunday, before Karen's visit, my Aunt Marlene texted me. Your mom says you are threatening to evict a teenage exchange student from your old bedroom. Please tell me this is not who you are becoming. I stared at the message. Then I sent back. Aunt Marlene, I am not evicting Frisia. I am addressing the fact that Mom and Dad rented out a bedroom I have an active lease for and have paid rent on for 8 years. They boxed my belongings in the garage without notice. I asked the program to protect Frisia while resolving the housing dispute. Attached are the lease and payment record. She called me 2 minutes later. 8 years? Yes. They made you pay rent for your room while you were in school? Yes. And then rented it to someone else? Yes. Your grandmother would haunt them. I know. Aunt Marlene was quiet. Then said, Send me the photos of the garage boxes. I did. I should have known what would happen next. Aunt Marlene was my grandmother's sister's daughter and had inherited the family gift for truth delivered at volume. She sent one message to the family group chat. Before anyone repeats Robert and Linda's version, please know Emily has an active lease for the bedroom they rented out, has paid monthly rent for 8 years, and asked the exchange program to protect the student while resolving the dispute. This is not about Emily refusing to share. This is about Robert and Linda charging their daughter rent, moving her belongings to the garage without notice, breaking Evelyn's Bluebird, and accepting payment from another source for the same room. Let's be accurate. The group chat went silent for 12 minutes. Then my cousin Leah wrote, "They charged her rent since freshman year?" Then Uncle Paul, "Robert, is this true?" Then Mom left the group chat. Dad called Aunt Marlene and apparently shouted. Aunt Marlene later told me she put him on speaker while watering tomatoes and said, "Robert, if you don't want people to know what you did, try not doing it." I loved her for that. By Monday afternoon, the family narrative had collapsed. My parents were no longer dealing with an emotional daughter. They were dealing with a lease, a suspended host payment, a witness, a program coordinator, a family group chat, and a broken heirloom everyone knew came from Grandma Evelyn. Dad hated every part of it. Mom hated the embarrassment most. I hated that embarrassment had more power than my hurt. But I used what worked. The resolution took a week. Karen found Frisia a new host family nearby with a retired couple whose previous exchange student had gone home early for family reasons. Frisia would move the following Saturday, voluntarily, with program support. She would stay at the same school. My parents lost the host payment for the disputed period and had to refund part of what they had received. They were placed under review and removed from the approved host list. Dad called that excessive. Karen called it policy. I called it consequences. As for me, I sent my parents a written demand. Not dramatic, not emotional. Clear. 1. Return May rent. 2. Reimburse or compensate damaged items, including the Bluebird repair estimate from a glass restoration artist. 3. Pay for professional cleaning of all clothing and textiles stored in the garage. 4. Reimburse temporary housing costs at Alyssa's calculated at a modest daily rate because I had been unable to access my leased room. 5. Provide written termination of the room lease with 60 days notice. 6. Allow me supervised access to retrieve belongings and move them to a storage unit. 7. Apologize to Frisia for placing her in a disputed room. Dad refused at first. Then Alyssa helped me draft a small claims court preparation packet. Again, she was not my lawyer. She was my friend with beautiful formatting. Dad paid. Not because he felt sorry, because he hated court. Mom wrote the apology to Frisia. It was stiff. Frisia accepted it politely. Then she hugged me before moving out. "I hope you get your room back," she said. I smiled sadly. "I think I got something else." "What?" My answer. She looked confused. So was I, a little. But the more I stood in that house, the clearer it became. I did not want the room back. Not really. Not after seeing how quickly they had priced it. Not after seeing my life in boxes. Not after hearing my father call Grandma's Bluebird just a figurine. The room had stopped being home before I arrived. I was simply the last person to know. I rented a small studio apartment in Columbus 2 weeks later. 3rd floor. No elevator. Wide windows. Old radiator. Terrible closet. Mine. I used part of the reimbursement to pay the deposit. Part to repair the Bluebird. Part to rent a moving van. Part to buy a bed frame that did not come with anyone else's permission attached. Moving day was quiet. Dad did not help. Mom offered. I said no. Aunt Marlene came with her pickup truck. Alyssa came with coffee. My cousin Leah came with labels and the aggressive energy of a woman who loves organizing other people's crises. We moved everything out of my parents' house. Not just college things, everything. Books, clothes, desk items, the mattress I had bought, the curtains, the framed photos, the journals, the Bluebird, now repaired but with the crack still faintly visible if you held it to the light. I left the room empty. Pale blue walls. Dust rectangles where shelves had been. Nail holes. Sun fading on the floor. Mom stood in the doorway while I took one last look. "You're really taking everything," she said. "Yes. We didn't want this." I turned to her. What did you want? She opened her mouth, closed it, then whispered, Money got tight. That was the first honest answer. I softened slightly. You could have told me. Your father was embarrassed. So you embarrassed me instead? She cried. I'm sorry. I waited. She knew by then. For what specifically? She said, answering herself before I could. I nodded. I'm sorry we rented your room without telling you. I'm sorry we moved your things. I'm sorry we took your rent and accepted money from the program. I'm sorry we made you feel like you had no place here after making you pay to keep one. That was the closest my mother had ever come to full accountability. It hurt more than the excuses. Because it reminded me she had always been capable of saying the truth. She had simply chosen comfort until comfort stopped working. Thank you, I said. Dad did not apologize that day. He watched from the driveway as Aunt Marlene tied down the last boxes. He said, You're making a mistake burning bridges. I placed the black document folder on the passenger seat of my car. No, Dad, I'm moving my belongings off one. He looked away. 3 months passed before he called. I had started a job with an education nonprofit. My studio had become home in small ways. A kettle on the stove. Blue curtains. A second-hand desk. Grandma's bluebird on the windowsill, catching morning light. Dad asked if he could come by. I almost said no, then said yes, because curiosity is sometimes stronger than resentment. He arrived with a small cardboard box. Inside were 3 things: my missing jewelry box, the external hard drive, Grandma's cardigan. He set them on my kitchen table. Found them in the hall closet, he said. I touched the cardigan. Thank you. He stood awkwardly. Your father, who had once ruled every room with certainty, looked uncomfortable in my 400-square-foot apartment because nothing in it belonged to him. Good. He said I handled things badly. I waited. He swallowed. I should not have made you sign that lease. That surprised me. I thought you were going to say you shouldn't have violated it. That too. Dad. He rubbed his forehead. I thought if I made you pay, you'd understand responsibility. I didn't realize I was teaching you not to trust me. There it was, the sentence I did not know I needed. My eyes filled. He continued. When money got tight, I panicked. The exchange program felt like easy money. I told myself you had moved on, but I kept taking your payments because... He stopped. Because? Because I could. Ugly, honest. I respected it more than the excuses. He looked at the bluebird on the windowsill. I'm sorry I called that just a figurine. I said nothing. She gave it to you. Yes. I knew that. Yes. I'm sorry. For what specifically? He smiled faintly, tired. For making your memories sound small because I didn't want to feel guilty for breaking them. That one landed. I nodded. Thank you. We did not hug, not then. But when he left, he paused at the door. This place suits you. I looked around. It does. He nodded. Good. That was not a full repair. But it was a crack in the old wall. I have learned not to dismiss cracks. Light uses them. My parents and I are still careful. I visit sometimes. Not overnight. Never overnight. When Mom says, you know, you always have a place here, she catches herself now. She says, I mean, you're always welcome. Different sentence. Better sentence. Dad transfers money to me every month now. Not because I asked. Because he insisted on repaying half of what I paid over 8 years. I told him he did not have to. He said, I do. The memo line on each transfer says, room rent repayment. The first time I saw it, I cried. Not because money fixes childhood. It does not. But because the story had changed direction. My black document folder sits in my desk drawer. Boring armor. Inside is the old lease, now terminated. Payment records. The glass repair receipt. My apartment lease. My job contract. A photo of the bluebird before and after repair. And a copy of Grandma's note from a birthday card. Leave when winter tells you to. Come back when you choose. I chose not to come back. Not to that room. Not to the version of family where belonging came with a monthly payment and could still be rented away. The final lesson is not that adult children are entitled to childhood bedrooms forever. They are not. Parents, homes change. Rooms become offices, gyms, guest rooms, sewing rooms, storage rooms, nurseries, or bedrooms for people who genuinely need shelter. Life moves. Children grow. Houses evolve. But if you charge your child rent for a room, you do not get to call her entitled for expecting tenant rights. If you make her sign a lease, you do not get to pretend it was symbolic when the terms become inconvenient. If you accept monthly payments and then rent the same room to someone else, that is not parenting. That is a transaction you lost control of. My parents gave my bedroom to an exchange student for rent money. I came home with the lease. And when they told me I had no claim there, the document they made me sign when I was 18 answered for me. I did not need to scream. I did not need to insult Frasier. I did not need to beg my parents to remember me. The lease remembered. The bank records remembered. The broken bluebird remembered. And eventually, so did they. Thank you for staying with me through this story. I know some of you have been told you were selfish for expecting fairness, dramatic for keeping receipts, childish for being hurt, or entitled for asking people to honor the agreements they created. If Emily's story reached you, I hope you remember that documentation is not cold. Sometimes it is the only warm place left when people rewrite what happened. Keep the lease. Keep the payment records. Keep the texts. Keep the little bluebird even if it breaks. And if someone charges you for belonging, make sure you keep proof of what they promised in return. Subscribe to Ultimate Revenge for more stories about quiet women, family betrayal, silent comebacks, and the moment one document changes the whole room. So tell me, if your parents rented out your bedroom while you were away at college, boxed your belongings in the garage, and then claimed you had no right to complain, would you let it go because they are your parents? Or would you put the lease on the table and let their own agreements speak?